Hello, and welcome to the Paul Cardall Podcast.
On our previous episode, we were joined by musician Peter Breinholt, who lives in Utah and teaches songwriting at one of the colleges. We are talking about the history of commercial Mormon music, which is a multi-million-dollar business. What I didn't realize in last week's episode and then this one is that we're going down the rabbit hole of discussing Mormon theology as it parallels with these musicians and their music. So if you're not Mormon, this is a really great education, very fascinating. And if you are Mormon, I'm sure you're going to have things that you'd like us to clarify or you want us to correct. Maybe it doesn't accurately reflect what you have had in your own experience. So please leave a comment. I want to hear from you. Mormonism was founded by Joseph Smith, who gave the world the Book of Mormon, which has been revered and lampooned on Broadway. Joseph Smith was a 19th century restorationist who told his followers he was visited by God, Peter, James, John, and other countless dead Christian leaders, and that Joseph was the one chosen to bring forth not only new scripture, but to organize God's official administration here on the earth to prepare the world for the second coming of Christ. And it is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There are 17 million people today who accepted the church as the true church and were baptized as members. Just to review, we kind of began with talking about how the Osmonds, everybody knows the Osmonds, Donnie and Marie.
I'm a little bit country, and I'm a little bit rock and roll. I'm a little bit of Memphis and Nashville, with a little bit of Motown in my soul. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I know I love it so. I'm a little bit country, and I'm a little bit rock and roll.
You know, Donnie's continued to have his show in Vegas. I think everybody in the world knows who the Osmonds are. So they had their fifth studio album released in 1973 when I was born, produced by Alan Osmond, recorded in Los Angeles at, you'll love this title, Kolob Studios.
Oh,
Peter, what is Kolob?
Kolob's the planet closest to where God dwells in Mormon theology.
So in Mormon theology, the founders actually gave the name of the planet closest to where God lives.
I think there's a logo. There's an old logo where it has a hand holding a planet.
Which is interesting because I've got the whole world.
Yeah.
You know?
But artistically, I thought it was pretty good. It's pretty good design.
I did some research though on the plan because we didn't really get into it, but just in review, there's a very respected music critic, Donald Gorosko. So he gave the album a 2.5 out of 5 stars. So he wrote, anyone who thinks of this family group as a bubblegum soul outfit will be bowled over by this incredibly ambitious outing, which attempts to explain the family Mormon's beliefs through a series of songs that cut across a wide variety of pop genres. So he's giving them props for diving into theology, but at the same time, he's saying, I don't know that this was right for this band. Okay, then we moved on to kind of the, additionally, in the 70s, while that was mainstream commercial, tapping into LDS themes, we talked about Lex de Azevedo, who was one of their band leaders who worked with the Osmonds. And he created these musicals, Saturday's Warrior, My Turn on Earth. And did you ever see Charlie?
I saw the movie. It was a book, I think, and then turned into a play and a movie.
Yeah, it was a Jack Whalen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he taught at Rick's, now BYU Idaho. I think he was a professor up there.
He was at Rick's. If you've seen Napoleon Dynamite, he is wearing a shirt that says Rick's College.
No, the girl is not a Mormon.
Sorry, I only date Mormon girls.
Your father isn't asking you to marry her, dear. Just think of it as missionary work.
Oh, okay. I'll take her to the visitor center, and then I'll buy her a milkshake.
Oh, come on, you can do better than that. She's the daughter of our regional manager.
Why don't you take her to the country club for dinner? Your father will treat.
What? In my Jeep?
Oh, all right, here, take my car.
Well, there are 10,000 eligible girls at BYU, and to get over my grief, I decided to date as many as possible.
They fall in love. It's a scandal. She joins the church, which is the arch of the book, and everybody's like, yes. And
That's
then
the payoff.
that's the payoff.
The payoff.
That's the payoff. But then here's the real tearjerker is she gets cancer. But the reason it's such a beautiful story is because of the LDS theology that they were sealed in a temple, so their marriage will endure beyond the grave.
So what did Lex do with that?
They made a musical, and in my opinion, besides Saturday's Warrior and My Turn on Earth, Charlie was the best written, the best composed, the best music of any of the musicals. And one of the songs called A Song of Redeeming Love, I actually kept a copy of the verse above in my room, so I would look at it every day. It says, and if I serve him every moment that I live with all the love I have to give, still I would be in his debt forever. I forgot that I've got this.
Wow. Zoom effect right on the right. That was intense. Right as you were quoting that meaningful song.
That's why you got.
That's good. That's good. That's good podcasting right there.
I have this new camera. It's called a OBS bot, but I think I have it on the wrong settings, so it can follow you around the room.
It's the right setting. It just likes you so much, Paul.
Oh man, it's pretty fancy, these cameras. Okay, so from the Osmonds to the musicals, and out of musicals, Michael McLean created musicals first, Celebrating the Light. Musicals must have been really popular in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, can I just add, so the musicals, and we weren't in Utah again. I said that last episode. So I was not experiencing it firsthand, but musicals, those were maybe the driving thing in the 70s. You had the Osmonds, but these musicals, they had touring groups, they had multiple casts, and it was a big business. And there's in Bountiful, Utah, there's what's called the Regional Center that was kind of built. My sense was kind of built because of the success of all these musicals. And then as a result, you had these. Well, I don't know if these became before or after, but these congregations started doing what were called road shows. So they would do their own sort of mini musicals. I mean, that was in the 70s. That was a big part of Mormonism, were the in-house musicals that were being written and produced, and people were going. And you're right, Michael McLean, who was this young kind of creative mind at what's called Bonneville, which is the marketing arm of the church. He starts collaborating on these commercials. So you get the musicals, and then the church starts doing commercials, and Michael is composing. And then you're right, he does an album, and then that becomes a play, Celebrating the Light, a musical. So yeah, that's a very important chapter in this story, is all that stuff.
Did you know that my very first and my only agent who would book shows for me, his name was Ralph Pavone.
Yeah, I remember Ralph. I met him.
Ralph was fantastic. He was so enthusiastic about LDS culture. And back in the 70s, he was actually hired to take Saturday's Warrior around the country.
Oh, really?
They rented high schools. The church at the time would, over the pulpit, which is a no-no, promote this commercial event and encourage everyone to go and bring somebody that's not LDS in an effort to teach them and get the missionaries over to their home. And so Ralph was involved in that. And I thought that was interesting because he was not LDS, but through the process, I guess to seal the deal, no pun intended, he joined the church.
Oh, he did. He's from New York, I think, wasn't he?
I don't remember, but I think he had some Jewish heritage, and he just really got caught up in the fire, and it was a great life.
And here's another sort of example of how big it was, for him to go all the way back to that. When we lived in a suburb of Salt Lake called Holiday, where you grew up, I'm young, married. Our first house there, our next door neighbor, we moved in and there was a family next door, and people would say to us, I mean, this is after we've been there a while, they're like, did you know that the so-and-so, the dad of this family, he was the original Elder Kessler in Saturday's Warrior. And so it was like, I mean, this was 30 years later, and it was still like, did you know? Like that. It had a far reach, it's followed him through life. So, and then the other thing I was going to say is that those plays, although they were in their peak and heyday in the 70s, they revisited it in the late 80s. They did a movie for Saturday's Warrior, and then they redid it again just 15 years ago or 10 years ago. So it's still going.
Yeah, when we went through the movie phase, and we talked about the movie phase, we talked about how, and I'll get to Jeff Simpson, but I want to read this. So Michael McLean not only created musicals celebrating the life and forgotten carols, but created various Mormon films produced by the First Presidency, from Together Forever to Heavenly Father's Plan. These were used as missionary tools. They would advertise these things on TV as a free gift. And then the missionaries, wherever these orders were delivered, the missionaries in those areas would hand deliver these with an invitation to hear more, just to watch it with them. And I did this, and you probably did this too. Probably Spanish versions. But so Michael's McLean, and he sold millions of records, was sold through Deseret Book. And I'm going to, we talked about it, but this is from the actual website. Deseret Book is a subsidiary of Deseret Book Deseret Book is a subsidiary of Deseret Management Corporation. The Deseret Management Corporation is a global operating company managing for-profit entities affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was established in 1966 by church president David O. McKay to hold already existing church assets. Subsidiaries include companies that do business in medical, dental, life, retirement, and disability insurance. They have radio and TV stations, an advertising agency, newspaper, commercial and residential property, hospitality properties, and other divisions. The church, and this is what most people don't understand, is the church is not a nonprofit organization like most Christian churches in the United States. It says the church is operated as a corporation sole and uses their nonprofit intellectual reserve, which holds the intellectual property, such as the copyrights, the trademarks, and other media. Deseret Book Companies has created subsidiaries. These other companies have all created subsidiaries. Deseret Book, like Shadow Mountain, which is their record label. And Michael McLean Afterglow, who we spent quite a bit of time listening to. Go back and listen. Fantastic Afterglow. Hillary Weeks, Mercy River, and countless others have been part of this label. So, you know, we can go down the rabbit hole of the church being a corporation, but I think people don't realize that it was created not as a nonprofit. And I had this amazing conversation, Peter, with a friend of mine who goes to, a Bible church here in Nashville, Tennessee. And he says, man, I wish these churches were corporations and not nonprofits. And I said, why? He said, because when it's a nonprofit, you can endlessly ask for more money. But when it's a corporation, everyone just pays a bill. And I thought, wow, that's interesting that the LDS Church, all they ask now, because back in the day it was a little different, but now all they ask is just 10% tithing, which is actually the commandment from the old law. And I'm going to say old law because a lot of Christians believe that Jesus fulfilled the law, and so tithing is not necessarily part of that. I include it. I think it is. I think it's really important. Taught me to organize my budget, and you just feel blessed when you're contributing to something.
I also think it's relevant to this conversation of greater culture, the arts, because, and I've been thinking about this lately. So one of the unique things about Mormonism and the church is that, like, it's going back very early on, it's more than just Christ's teaching. It's like, how do I connect with God? It's a whole nation. it's a whole Zion, the whole Zion concept. It doesn't end with like, here are some teachings that will connect you with God, which sometimes, frankly, I wish it were. Like I have my moments when I'm like, that's what I want. But it's a whole lifestyle. It's a whole whole community, including an artistic community. It's work, family, aesthetic, entertainment, networks. It is all wrapped up under the umbrella of Mormonism if you're a part of it. And so it makes sense that what you just said is true, because they, like, going back to Brigham Young, it's like, we're not just teaching people to be better. We are building an empire, not empire is not the word. We are building Zion.
Empire is the right word, I think, because the kingdom of God.
Kingdom.
An empire has an emperor or a king, and he's King of Kings. So, and heaven would be considered an empire by Christians because Jesus is Lord.
And it's and the reason this is relevant to our conversation, Paul, is because where the arts fits in under that community, we're not just like I actually am intrigued by how so much of the American Christian experience works, and it's how kind of free form it is and independent. You've got these parishes, you've got these congregations that pop up like startup businesses, but in Mormonism, like, it is like the arts and the food storage and the self-reliance and the finances, it's all a big, massive thing.
Yeah. Well, Protestantism, and don't you think the Protestantism in America, it's like the Wild West, and everybody is setting up camp and staking their territory and trying to bring followers into their communities. Mormonism came out of that movement, and I still kind of feel that it's part of Protestantism without being Protestantism, because it is influenced heavily by the Reformation and this idea that there was some type of major problems between the time Christ was on the earth and when the public finally got the Bible. And so Brigham Young takes all these people, all these converts to the West, to the Wild West, and Brigham Young, who was I think he was the senior member of the apostles at the time, took claim when Joseph Smith died. But did you know there's like 80 sects that have come out? 80 different forms of Mormonism, churches that have come out of it all?
Yeah, I knew that because my dad was a missionary in what was called the Central States Mission, but it was headquarters in Independence, Missouri, the ground zero for most of those sects. And when you go back and visit it, it's pretty intriguing to go back and find that there's all these sects. They believe in the Book of Mormon, they believe in Joseph Smith, but then they part ways at a certain point in the history. And in fact, I heard, I don't want to get on another tangent, but
I said rabbit hole, so here we go. Let's do it.
There was a guy who was a guest. He was an evangelical, and but he loves Mormonism. He was a guest on John DeLynch show, and I can't remember, maybe within the last year. And he knows so much about Mormonism, but he's an outsider looking in, which makes it even more interesting to hear him talk. And he said he studied a lot of these sects, and he said, "You want to know my favorite congregation or my favorite denomination? Christian, Mormon, of any religious denomination, the ones that I feel like are doing it closest to the way I interpret the Bible." And he named one of these LDS sects, and it's just called the Church of Jesus Christ. You can look them up.
Oh, yeah.
They are scattered throughout.
Yeah.
They have little things. In fact, so we have Becca and my wife and I have a son who goes to school in Ohio, goes to college in Ohio, a place called Kenyon. And we went back to visit him. We're like, we want to go. We looked up the Church of Jesus Christ because we wanted to go sit in. And it ended up not working out, but it was so cool to go to their website and it's like looking up, online locations. And I emailed a guy and said, we're kind of interested in coming. He got right back to me. And anyway, I agreed with him as I looked at their website, was seeing how they did it. It's like, oh, they do this like the mainstream LDS church, but they don't do this, and they got rid of that. And I liked what I agreed with him in many ways.
And for the record, Brigham Young was there at the time of Joseph. So Brigham Young took this large group of people, mostly they were the converts from England that he and his boys, the apostles, had gone over. So they had already earned this trust with these people, and they didn't really know Joseph, but they knew Joseph through these guys. And so that became kind of this corporation that we're talking about. And then you had all those breakoffs like you're talking about. And then most people see today, when you hear the word Mormon, they're thinking polygamy. And so then those are the breakoffs of the Brighamites, the Brigham churches. So, so we digress. We'll get back here. So you had Deseret Book that was selling commercial music. And a lot of the music were these cassettes and records of these musicals, and then Michael McLean's music and some of these others. Now, when you have a church like the LDS Church, there's not really a lot of people willing to compete with the corporate entities. But Lex de Azevedo had started a label and worked harmoniously with Deseret Book because they respected him with the work he did with Osmonds. So thank you, Lex, to bring in some other works. And I found the name of the label. It's called Embryo.
Oh yeah, Embryo, because we were Aubergine came later. That was the instrumental label that John Schmidt was on, but Embryo was the one.
Aubergine was the instrumental label.
Aubergine,
John Schmidt from the Piano Guys did. And I thought, wow, Peter. So we have Embryo Records, and then on the other side, there's an actual group called Afterglow.
yeah.
And then we have Kolob Studios. And as my friend Mark Mabry, who's an artist, Mark Mabry does Reflections of Christ?
No.
He's like, well, there's a weirdo in every church. So we've got these interesting.
Well, you just went safe. Stone Angel, just this safe.
Stone Angel. Then everyone's like, is it a stoned angel? Is it a
Oh, yeah.
What is it? Yeah, I'm always explaining myself. So, but embryo, I like that because he created this embryo. This, I don't know how that embryo developed or who created, but so was Lex. Lex helped that embryo develop into what it is today, which is the idea that you can create commercial music independently and still have the support of Deseret Book. And Deseret Book's fantastic. So,
and I just want to add, I think you're right. I don't want to overlook the fact that you said in passing that Lex, it took a little bit of sass, it took a little bit of moxie to go up against Deseret Book, and he did it, and now it's common. But at the time, because we know Lex, and he is a businessman, and he's tough when he needs to be tough, and I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm overstating, maybe there was no conflict at all, but you're right. Like at that stage in the 70s to say, we're not going through these channels, we're creating our own channels for this.
Yeah, I think Lex had the support because with Saturday's Warrior and the church encouraging bishops to invite people to Saturday's Warrior, there was this concept of working with them. But Peter, there were at the time, and there still are kind of today, there were hundreds of LDS themed bookstores independent of Deseret Book. You had the LDS Booksellers Association, and these comprised of stores all over the United States and Canada and England, and they were selling music too. So they existed a long time ago. You'd go into this little mom and pop store that just sold like statues of Joseph Smith and books by Mormon apostles and some figurines of Christ.
They're still out there.
Yeah, they are. Like Cardston Book and Ensign Book, and it's kind of like walking into one of those Catholic stores. And my mother-in-law is very Catholic, so we would go to a store, all rosaries and pictures of the Pope and pictures of Jesus on the cross. And I said to her, I want to see if I can find any art or statue that shows Jesus resurrected. And I could not find anything. But when you go into the Mormon bookstores, you'll see tons of statues of the resurrection, but no statues of him on the cross.
No, not one. Yeah.
No. Because as they say, if your mother died in a car accident, why would you put that around your neck?
Yeah, the old missionary line. The Deseret Book hasn't made it easy for those mom and pop shops. The Deseret Book has been the behemoth that will buy. They bought Siegel, didn't it? They didn't buy Covenant. When the competitors start to really roll, Deseret Book is typically. They bought Jeff Simpson's, didn't they?
Yeah. He's next on the list.
Okay.
And they should. That's business. That's great business. Let somebody else start something amazing and then go and buy it. Unless it's Galen Rust. And we will go into Galen Rust and legacy in this episode. So, and we're also going to talk about Gladys Knight. So,
Okay.
And we will be right back.
Did you know the best way to support your favorite musician is to bypass social media and go to their website and subscribe to their mailing list? Going directly to the artist's website ensures you and the artist will have no third party controlling your relationship. It's a direct contact. Please show your support, particularly for our host. Go to Paul's website and subscribe, followed by other artists you enjoy. Whether you just need to relax, study, meditate, pray, or for some other healthy reason, Paul's music helps create an atmosphere of peace wherever you are. Add Paul Cardall's album Return Home to your favorite platform, whether it's iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, or some other. For the sheet music and more information, visit www.paulcardall.com.
go grab your big soda. We're gonna talk about that's a reference for Utahns. Jeff Simpson came from Walt Disney. He acquired Lexi Azeveto's record label called Embryo. He signed his daughter Julie D'Azevedo, who is amazing.
Jeff signed Lex's daughter Julie.
Well,
Lex signed Julie originally.
He acquired Embryo, and Lex had signed. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're correct. Embryo signed Lex's daughter, Julie, who's an amazing therapist today, and she's got a great podcast. Julie D'Azevedo, Michael Webb, and many others, and one of the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints music's best-selling artists and most influential, Kenneth Cope.
Never a better hero, never a truer man, hoping to save us.
We talked about Kenneth Cope. Kenneth is a rabbit hole in and of itself. Ask Alexa to play Kenneth Cope. And most Latter-day Saints wanting to do Mormon music either sought to be with Embryo or Deseret Books label. And all albums were distributed and sold by various competitor companies to all Deseret Books and hundreds of independent bookstores. And I will say to you, Peter, that when I was playing my music at the Roof Restaurant, which is a premier restaurant in Utah where a lot of people go, it overlooks the temple. I had a great gig there. They were paying me like $15 an hour and I was getting tips, and I could go in the back and eat the food. So but when I was there, I tried to get into Deseret Book. I tried to get into these stores and they said no. And I didn't realize how competitive it was to get into those. And being in Nashville today, I would say it's harder to get into the Deseret Book stores than it is to get into any of the commercial stores that are available to people to go buy music. And it's because there's a standard. And I felt at the time like I wasn't living up to the standards. I needed to prove myself. And that makes sense because you don't want to buy a bunch of
artistic standards or worthiness standards.
I think it's both. I think a lot of it is, what is this product? Who is the audience? And does it appeal to the clientele? And slowly, because I started selling enough and then got affiliated with Richard Paul Evans, who was a darling to bookstores because he made them a lot of money with the Christmas box. Jeff Simpson, who was my neighbor and happened to be my Elders Quorum president or small men's group, small men's group leader.
A group for men that's small, not a group for small men.
Yeah, we didn't get half price on anything. So Jeff Simpson, I talked to him and, it took some time. He didn't really say yes. But then eventually they gave me a deal with their distribution company, Excel. And Robert Warren, who was in charge of their distribution, worked with me, and it was amazing. And we finally got stuff out. I think Excel was a company that you would use to get into the bookstores, or did you use there was another distribution company that serviced all local music called Soundburst.
Oh yeah. So I only use these companies as distributors. I never went with a label. And I remember Kenny Hodges. You remember Kenny Hodges? He's like the A&R guy at Deseret Book in the late 90s. And I remember meeting him. I remember he said to me, this is for us, this is like, things are just sort of really cooking for us. And I remember he was nice. And he said, boy, we meaning Deseret Book, we'd love to get our mitts on you. And I remember thinking, I just say this now because I remember thinking, it's like, no way, that's not my plan. But I did use Jeff Simpson's company, which became Excel. Embryo changed the name to Excel. They did a great job distributing. And then there was a mom and pop distributor called Soundburst, and we did probably most of our work with them. I think there was some I think Jeff started taking some of Soundburst's business. There might have been some bad blood there, but that's business. And yeah, so that was the standard at the time. And then I'll just mention this quickly, Paul. In the ensuing years, probably in the 2000s, it seemed like Deseret Book went through a period where they started distributing, and they started taking on, not as a label, but as a distributor, they started taking on tons of people. Like the Utah local music scene was cooking, and they started getting involved. And then all of a sudden they did an About Face. They regretted it, I think. And do you remember when they returned tons of product to tons of artists?
So this is the Brad Haslam phase.
Yes.
The Bob Hollander era.
Yeah.
Bob Hollander, who is one of the smartest
Just
people.
ran into him on Saturday.
I love him. He helped develop a couple singing groups at BYU that became commercial. And then
he was the one. He got the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. He basically, kind of resurrected their career, right? He got them on.
He did.
They got a #1 album under Bob.
Yeah.
Did he do Consider the Lilies? Anyway.
So, but he was always with Excel. He was with Excel Entertainment first. He was advising and helping Jeff Simpson run that label, and brought a lot of wisdom. He's just a very intuitive. I actually hired him to mentor me on understanding how to do better shows for the LDS market. I don't know that was the right fit for me, but a lot of people. He worked for Michael McLean doing his Forgotten Carols that have carried from the 80s all the way to today. And then what happened was when Deseret Book acquired Excel Entertainment because they were making movies, I think Bob, if you're listening, I love you. Correct us. Bob went over and worked at Deseret Book, and I think it was really frustrating for him at Deseret Book.
Yeah,
because he recognized the red tape involved in trying to get projects done. And this is not the church's fault. This is business anywhere you go in the world. Trying to get things done artistically is very difficult when there are people above you that have no idea about music, but they love music in their car, going to their law firms with Kenny G or whatever they're listening to. And
but I will say there is a layer. There is a layer that Bob had to deal with, and we don't need to get into it. But it is business, but there is some additional complexity that's unique. But go ahead, Bob.
I do think, any church needs to be careful of who they promote or involved with, because it's whether is that person loyal to the church? Are they endowed?
No.
Have they received all the ordinances that qualify them for the highest level of what is promoted? So, and I'd say
was it under Bob then and Brad Haslam? I don't know if they're there. Was it under them where they got really top heavy, and so they let everybody go? And they asked these artists to buy their product back, which was a hardship for all these artists to be expected to. They'd already been paid. Now give us our money back. We're going to give you your CDs back.
Yeah. So this is a sad chapter. This is a Kirtland Bank period of LDS music. Bob, I don't think had any responsibility over that. Jeff hired this really intelligent, wonderful person, Brad, who's an amazing husband, father, and he had been very successful at making temple calendars and had gotten them sold all over the place. And Brad, if you're listening, please correct us. Brad was given the responsibility over at Deseret Book, and he was seeking international accounts, national accounts, because not only were there the bookstores, they were trying to get music into
Walmart,
Costco, and Walmart. And so he was he's a great salesman. And he went and sold, but in the deal, there's a return clause, and what I would have done, what I think a lot of people would have done, is made sure you can't return product. But he did the deal, so he ordered we all spent a lot of money to Duplicate,
Manufacture CDs. Yep.
Duplicate, which is a dying breed, Duplicate CDs, and Video West, or wherever we got our CDs from. And so, yeah, all those CDs went out into the corporate commercial entities of Walmart and Costco, and even some of the grocery stores. You'd see an LDS rack, an LDS section. And yeah, there wasn't the response. This is business, it happens. And so we were all forced to take product back and pay back the check that we had received. And I remember at that moment, a lot of artists said, we're done with this local entity that's trying to get our music out there. I think a lot of artists, we were very emotional. We stepped back and we're like, but at the time for me, and I don't know what you were feeling, but the time for me, I was like, look, you do not, if you're back in Nauvoo when the president, Joseph Smith, is starting this faith and you're all in, and there's a company across the street who wants to try to take the business from his store. He didn't have a store, but if he had a store and you're trying to take away his business, I was like, there's no way. There's no way. I would totally surrender, pay him and take the ride. And that's what I did. It hurt, but I paid them. I remained completely loyal. And to this day, if they wanted my product, I would gladly give it to Desert Drum Book because I believe in what they're doing. But yeah, that was just hard for artists because we barely make any money anyways.
Right. And this is, I guess, the reason we're sort of stopping here is that this is just part of the story of the growth, the shrinking, the ups and downs of a growing industry within a religious community.
Yeah. And we're not bashing on anybody. This is what happens when we are growing these businesses. And, credit to Brad for the ambition of what is now a reality. Our music is now streamed everywhere, and LDS musicians today, their music is streamed everywhere. But at the time, this was before the internet. I think the internet was just breaking out, but everybody still had CDs. And so he was able to get our music into stores that we wanted to get into and thought, oh yeah, we just need our product in there. So he did it. He pulled it off. So kudos to him. But at the same time, the marketing, artists don't realize they have to do the marketing too. If you don't have a label and you're independent, you can't rely on just distribution. I think there's this mindset back then that, oh, I just need to get distributed and then my music will sell if it's in the stores. That's not true at all. Okay, so we talked about, I know we're halfway, we're like way in and we're still reviewing. And then finally we talked about EFY, the EFY Records especially for youth, which is a program that the church has through the Brigham Young University, which is their school, and funded by a lot of the tithing. And it's a great school. And so we kind of went through that rabbit hole. And EFY not only carried from the 1985 or 86, it's carried all the way to 2019. And today they're doing
it's called F. Yeah. The church, the larger church. So EFY was always sort of almost a separate thing. Like it was out of BYU, and so it was kind of like its own little business. But it was BYU, so it was technically under the church. But then it got so successful. We talked about this. The church a couple of years ago stepped in and said, "All right, we're going to take this and we're going to rebrand it." They call it FSY, which stands for the Strength of Youth. And they've made it they've streamlined it. They've made it affordable for everybody. They've done some things to sort of broaden it. But yeah, that was the end of EFY, and that was the end of EFY albums.
So FSA does not stand for Forever Single Adult.
FSY.
Oh, FSY. Sorry, I thought FSA.
Yeah.
That's it. Forever. Okay. Okay. So, okay. Mormons doing Mormon themed music. We'll talk about that first. And Gladys Knight comes into that, the greatest female from Motown. I mean, she's amazing, from Detroit. We'll talk about her and Mormons doing mainstream commercial music. We'll get into the Arthur Kanes of the New York Dolls, the Jets, and all the way to the piano guys and Lindsey Sterling and Neon Trees, all these artists. And Panic for the Disco. We'll get into all that stuff. So Mormons doing Mormon music. So emerging artists in the 2000s who wrote music with LDS themes. A lot of the instrumental artists were me and Jenny Oakes Baker, a violinist who happens to be the daughter of probably the most
number 2 man in the church,
second most powerful man on the planet. Through the Latter-day Saints lens, and Kurt Bester. We all love Kurt, and who has done so much and continues to score music and write music for Jenny Oakes, making her sound like the incredible artist that she is and deserves. Ryan Tilby, everyone's right-hand man. Tilby is the greatest. You know, we did that guitar hymns record back in the day, and that's continued.
You've done well for him.
You know, I said, Ryan, come in and do a guitar record of hymns. He's like, okay, I'm kind of a bass player. I like the banjo. I said, well, we're not doing banjo. So come in, play the guitar and put out some hymns. And like 3 days of work. And that album has streamed probably nearly 1 billion times.
Gee.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you go back,
couldn't happen to a more deserving musician. Ryan Tilby is pound for pound maybe the most talented musician I've had on my roster. I don't know. I've had some pretty good ones, but he's awesome.
Tilby is kind of the he's like a Clive Romney millennial, but he's not a millennial. Is he more like our generation X? What are we?
He might be a cusper. He might be in between Gen X and millennial.
Cusper?
On the cusp.
Oh, okay. I don't know. The same people that come up with what those are come up with National Pig Day or National.
My son's way into these generational things. So,
all right, Peter, when I say Janice Cat Perry, comes to your mind?
Janice Cat Perry is I was first exposed to her just through, she's a very traditional, almost hymn-like composer. And she's like a modern hymn composer. And so she's beloved and used a lot in the church. I've never owned an album. I'm not even really familiar with a lot of her stuff. However, she's respected and has had longevity. And her son, Stephen Cat Perry, he's just a good dude. And I love that guy. And so I just have one thing that comes to mind is pretty random, but you get these charter schools popping up in Utah, and they're sort of teaching the curriculum they believe in on their terms. And so there's one called the American Heritage School, which is where Casey Brown is running the music department and doing great things. But it's a very how do I describe it? It's conservative. I think politically, it's a very
it's an Orthodox, conservative, founding father covenant school with strict LDS theology interwoven with the teachings of the founding fathers.
Right, and that's one of the things they want to do. They want to be able to teach history as they see it, the relevant parts. So I was asked to go in and do some stuff, and I noticed on the walls in the music room, they had like a timeline, and it had like Beethoven and Mozart. I don't know the order, it's like, and then it gets into modern day, and it's Janice Cat Perry. as they had on the wall.
I'm trying to be like Jesus. I'm following in his ways. I'm trying to love as he did.
And so that tells you she's quite relevant.
But I would say Janice Cat Perry, her music, we've all been singing it. Anyone who's ever been part of or associated with the church know her songs. And she is one of the best melody writers. And yeah, I mean, it's the songs for children is what she's created.
Yeah, she's written in terms of the primary catalog, and in our church, primary is meaning the children's music, their own songbook. They have their own songbook. She's number one. You know,
Yeah.
Clive's done some good stuff, but Janice Cap is it.
Yeah, and the LDS Church for years has been saying they have a new hymn book that's coming out that's going to be current, that's going to be relative to a global church. I'm pretty sure Janice Cat Perry's music will be part of that. It's kind of considered canon.
Yeah.
The hymn book, because they say whatever is in there is scripture.
Well, she's the only one I could think of who's like a living contributor to, like, you know, you like all the hymns. You look at the names at the bottom, people, they go way back to the 19th century. There are some more contemporary ones like Bruce R. McConkie, who, they're apostles. Janice Cat Perry's the exception. That's just a really remarkable thing that her name is all over the hymn book, and she's a contemporary musician.
One of her similar associates, Dorothy Anderson. Dorothy Anderson wrote, what's that song? What do you do in the summertime? What do you do in the summertime when all the leaves are blue?
Yeah.
Green. Well, the leaves are not blue, but what do you do in the summer? And I wanted to do that song on my primary worship. And typically you would just do the song and pay out the residual mechanical to the writers through Harry Fox Agency. But a lot of these people like Janice, back in those days, you would have to contact them directly and get permission. And when I reached out to Dorothy, she's on the phone. She started crying, like, you want to do my song? Nobody ever wants to do my song. I said, well, I'm going to do it. And it actually has become one of the most popular songs on my primary worship album. And I did some Janice Cat Perry tunes on there. But yeah, Stephen Cat Perry, we love him. He wrote so much music from Comora's Hill, kind of a pageant thing, musical. And then he worked with BYU Radio and was instrumental in helping a lot of artists come on BYU Radio to share their story. I think we've both been on that.
Yeah.
And he's just an all-around good guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so after Janice Cat Perry, while EFY continued to release album each year, the church began hosting face-to-face firesides, big face-to-face events for the youth, beginning with David Archuleta. And it says, David Archuleta, it is the first time, and everybody, he's the one from American Idol. I think most people know who David Archuleta is if you paid attention to any pop culture. David Archuleta, it's the first time the church has ever done a live face-to-face event for their youth. Returned, and this is how it was billed in the Deseret News, the church-owned newspaper. Returned missionary and former American Idol finalist David Archuleta spoke with youth in 91 countries, doing 2 separate 1-hour events, one in Spanish and one in English. The broadcast went to more than 34,000 video streams around the world, some in front of up to 80 youth on one stream at LDS meeting houses and homes. The moderator was Sister Bonnie Oscarson, the Young Women's President, and Brother David Beck, Young Men General President. These are the people in charge. of the young men and the young women. They asked Brother Archuleta a variety of questions, along with questions from youth and around the world. And so it was broadcast, and millions of people have seen it. And I think, Peter, this was the first time where the church, outside of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, performing with commercial artists, where they took one of their own and put them up on a stage and endorsed it as something that you need to pay attention to. And that was revolutionary. And then, we can get into what happens next with that artist.
Yeah.
Like, they that artist?
So there's a lot to say about this part of the conversation. And let me go back a little bit. They actually started to experiment with that back in 2000. So you remember, for those who don't know, that the church is sort of the broadcast center, the place where all the general conferences took place were in the historic tabernacle for decades. And then in the year 2000, they built a bigger one, and they called it the conference center, and then turned the tabernacle into more of almost a cultural arts center. So around that time, I was approached, John Schmidt, Ryan Shoup, Nancy Hansen, Kenneth Coate, all these people we've been talking about, we were all approached to do were you involved with this? It was the first ever contemporary artist concert in the tabernacle.
It's strange, Peter, because if you walked into a Deseret book and you looked at their top 10, you'd see like the Tabernacle Choir is the bestseller, and then my record. But I was never invited.
Oh.
And it was confusing to me, but I realize now that my music did not speak to the youth. It spoke to other people that are using it for things. And so I was always a closeted, Shoup or Peter, Tilby. I wanted to be playing in these bands, but that was all that God blessed me with. But you were on some type of committee that instilled, and I'm not bitter about that. I know my place, but you were on some type of committee though that helped strategize and come up with
that's what I want to talk about.
That
thing. But I will say really quick, Paul, is that John Schmidt was the only instrumentalist on the roster, and John Schmidt, you're right, you were not doing backflips off of the piano and stuff like that. So John is he's unique in that he was instrumentalist who was often part of that group.
Yeah, kind of an.
He's the only one, but Jenny Oaks Baker was never on the list. Other instrumentalists weren't. So it was really geared towards contemporary music, and so we were brought in, and there was a producer, and he was the liaison between the artists and the top quorum of the church, whose idea this was.
He was the sentinel that
Yes. And it was they really sort of laid it out to us like, this is a big deal, you guys, and we chose you because we trust you. I remember that was the big message. We want you to be yourselves because we know who you are. Well, that was the first meeting. The closer we got to this event, the more it was like, hey, try not to do this and try not to do that. And like, it was this middleman who was probably worried that his reputation was going to be ruined if it didn't go well. And so by the end, and I'm not joking, by the end, he was telling us, try not to close your eyes when you sing, because that it kind of gives off the impression that you're possessed by the music. And so by the time we go on stage, the stakes are so high, according to what we've been told, that Nancy Hansen, and your listeners may not know Nancy. Nancy is a singer-songwriter from this scene they call her the natural, because she's so at ease in every setting. She's just so comfortable and relaxed, and that's her appeal. I'm standing up next to her on stage, and she looks, I've never seen her like that before. Like they psyched everybody out. That was an early version of them trying to experiment with this contemporary, and then flash forward, I don't know how many years, and then you've got the face-to-face events. with David Archuleta, that's actually a worldwide broadcast. And you know what? We can talk about the production of those things, and we can talk about David's story and how he probably feels about it now. But
I am going to throw in my opinion here because when you control art, there's a reason it doesn't work out.
But so back to the face-to-face thing, it would be my number one critique. They don't feel authentic at all.
No, it's so stiff. They had Lindsey Sterling in 2014, who is one of the most, I don't know, she's probably the most popular violinist. She's like, I don't know, those that love the game Zelda, she's like if Zelda came to life. She dances, she's
created a whole world in her videos. It's like a fantasy world where she plays the violin and she dances, and she has done, like last time I was in New York City, I saw on the paper, like she was playing she's doing a Central Park concert that night.
Yeah. So this is like where the church is like endorsing these artists, putting their stamp of approval on these artists. Psychologically, if you see an artist with a general authority, you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, the Lord wants us to listen to this music. And then 2017, they had a couple. They had Madeline Page, who was on American Idol, Lexi Walker, who was on America's Got Talent. These are amazing artists. And then Patch Crow, an Australian artist from the band Beyond Five, who Beyond Five has done a lot of inspirational LDS themed music. And I don't know who was, and after that, they kind of stopped doing music and they focused just on like the apostles face to face. I don't know. They just shifted from famous artists to like having a personal interview with an apostle. And I don't know. How did those affect your kids? And
I don't think my kids were really aware of them, to be honest with you. But I will say that I think I heard about them. I remember the little clips I saw. I didn't see many, but the clips I saw, maybe this is worth saying, maybe not worth saying, but I think from my perspective as an artist, I look at that and I'm like, oh, would I do that? Because I have because there's a part of me that wants to stay separate. And it's like the Beatles were given the NME medal or some award, and they were a little conflicted by it, I think.
Yeah.
And I think Mick Jagger, he turned down the knighthood. And I remember even with certain presidential inaugurations, there are musicians who are like, there's a certain part of them that's like, I don't want to be co-opted by this. I am a voice in the wilderness. I'm an artist. My job is to give my take always. And I don't want to be broad. So I would be quite conflicted personally with that. That's irrelevant. That's just an observation.
Yeah.
Everybody you named did it and had no problem doing it. And I don't really know anything about why they got away from that. I don't think, again, I've said this already, I don't think I'd have to go back and watch them. But like Lindsey Sterling, for example, you go Google her and you look at her YouTube videos, she transports the viewer to a different world. And then you see her on a stage with a couple, of the leaders of the church, and it's very scripted. It's pretty sterile.
Yeah.
It's a real contrast to what she presents in her own videos. Yeah. And but she did it, and I'm sure it went great.
Yeah, it's like bringing in Coldplay to play Parliament.
Yeah, would they do it? Would they do it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Stay mysterious. You told me that. Chris Martin's rule.
Well, Chris Martin's rule number one, but that was Bono's too. That was U2's number one, remain a mystery. Why?
And Bono has a whole chapter in his book about, he actually did end up in the 2000s. He ended up, much to the maybe protest of some of his bandmates, he did start going to Washington and getting pictures taken with George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And I remember when they came through Salt Lake it would have been the Elevation Tour, and Orrin Hatch, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, was still in office, still alive, and I did something with Orrin Hatch. Like we had done some music together or something, and we were talking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Bono, friend of mine. I was backstage at his show at the Delta Center last week. Good guy." And I'm sure that Larry Mullen was just dying during that. So,
Yeah, Orrin Hatch wrote music with Janice Cat Perry as a senator. Orrin Hatch was the senior senator from Utah, and even in the Senate and in the Judiciary Committee, him and Teddy, back in the day when Congress got along, Teddy Kennedy was one of his closest friends. And, and the entire music industry knows Orrin Hatch because Orrin Hatch made it possible for songwriters to get more residual income. He did the Monetization Act. It was really hard to get Utah politicians to even approve it. Took a lot of lobbying on a lot of parties.
Yeah. Orrin Hatch was interested in this topic, and he was very interested in peer-to-peer technology as it emerged in like the year 2000 with Napster. And so he had a field judiciary hearing at BYU, and he had me come as to represent the artist. Sean Fanning, who invented Napster, was next to me, and then you had some tech industry CEOs next to them, and he just listened. He was so interested, and there were 8,000 BYU students in the Wilkinson Center listening. And I don't know, like, I guess when you're a senator, you just sort of lean into the things that are on your radar and that you're interested in. Because he was doing music, that was on the radar for Orrin Hatch earlier than most.
Yeah, Orrin was very passionate about his songwriting. He wanted to celebrate America, and he was very serious when he would talk about it and the impact he was hoping it would have. And he was so good to me, and good to you and everyone that knew him. I mean, artists had a special relationship with Orrin Hatch. It's fascinating stuff. So
we were at face to face. We
face to face. So that was a period where the LDS Church in our current time publicly celebrated these artists because of their faith, because of their ability to reflect the church wherever they went in the world, the way they answered questions, the way they do all these things. And yet at the same time, there's a stiffness about it. And as artists, we just want it to be more personal and less scripted.
Right.
You can be scripted and still have emotion. I mean, Together Forever and Heavenly Father's Plan videos that Michael McLean put together, we always thought those were true stories, but they were actors, they were scores, it was all script like a TV show to get you to emotionally feel sad and happy and glad and all these things. But okay, so we'll get into Alex Boyer.
Yeah, I know he was a missionary, and I know he was a missionary. He probably came home in 92. He was in Birmingham, one of the England missions. Anyway, so he did the boy band, and then I don't know at what happens next, but he winds up leaving the boy band because I think he felt like it was compromising his values.
Well, he had joined the church.
Okay, so that was before the mission, yeah.
Yeah. I think he had joined the church. Well, yeah, but joins the church before he goes on a mission. But I think part of that boy band. But he ends up coming to Utah, and to the point where he's so charismatic. He walks in a room, everybody knows he's like a cheerleader for Christ, and it led him to being used by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
Right. And you got to say real fast about Alex before you. So what he does, he's a singer. He can dance. I don't know if he's a composer. He might be, but he's like an MC. He's a personality. If you run into Alex in the street, which I had, like I remember, you run into him, and in 10 minutes you'll walk away. You won't know what you just hit you. Yeah. He has an energy about him. And so that's kind of his gift. Like it's not songwriting. It's just being in the room, and whether he's singing or dancing or just emceeing that, like, and I think it was also relevant because culturally, like, we love people like Alex Boyer. We love international people who come into our community. It's a validation for us, but we also we do like to feel like we're diverse. I think he provided all of that. Then the piano guys looped him in for some of their early videos, and there was a little partnership there. And then he started doing his own albums, and that's where I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Yeah, he started doing albums. He went on America's Got Talent, and it was incredible, but they didn't move him on. And he also, he's kind of the James Brown of a Latter-day Saint.
That's his style.
That's his style. And so it brought to Mormon culture this concept that you can do cool R&B, pop music. And at the same time, the church was emerging into countries where there are, a lot of African nations. And Alex comes from one of the countries in Africa. And the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, for a lot of their important celebrations, I call them gigs.
Was he in the choir? Did they put him in the choir for a while, or was he just featured?
Oh, they put him smack dab in the middle of all those England Americans, and the camera was on him. But what was incredible about it is whenever they would do, celebrate Black History Month, he was front and center singing the classics with the choir. Take Me to the River, all these incredible pieces that it's soulful Christian gospel that the choir would do. And I think Alex elevated the choir in such a profound way that, for me personally, I think that was his greatest moment, is surrendering to be with the choir, to elevate the choir and the church's mission to bring their message to other nations and to a culture that's largely been rejected in the history. And we don't need to go into the history of the Black
Mormonism
culture.
and race.
Yeah, but it's been challenging for every religion, every society, to deal with racism. And it was my dad that actually reported the story when the LDS Church opened up the priesthood blessings to people of all colors, and that was in 1978. And that emerges into our conversation about Gladys Knight.
He's leaving. On that midnight train to Georgia. Leaving on the midnight train. Yeah. Said he's going back.
Gladys Knight and the Pips. Gladys Knight and the Apostles. Gladys Knight and President Hinckley, who had such a special relationship. President Hinckley was the prophet that went on 60 Minutes that kind of brought the church out of obscurity into international light. And he was the prophet during the Winter Games in Salt Lake City, the Olympics. And so he'd been
a journalism major in college. He'd gone to England, London on his mission. So he was where he had done the street stuff. And he wasn't shy. He wasn't afraid of sitting down with Mike Wallace for 60 minutes. And he had kind of a no nonsense way about him. Like, you can ask me anything. And that was not familiar.
No,
for us.
They were scripted before usually.
Right. And you could argue, a lot of people miss him. And so you've got Gordon B. Hinckley, that's happening. And somewhere in there, I don't know the whole story, but the legendary Gladys Knight, who had come up who, I don't know all the details of her upbringing, but I know there were ups and downs in her lives, and she was seeking stability and somewhere in there, I think it may have had to do with her residency in Las Vegas. She's now a legacy performer, a legend in the Hall of Fame, and she's in Vegas. And somewhere in there, she has a brush with the church and ends up converting to the church. And she really clicks with Gordon B. Hinckley. Do you want to add something about her conversion story?
There's a story. There's a great story here. It says Gladys Knight found Mormonism late in life. Now, Gladys had been in a lot of different churches. She's a gospel singer, 7-time Grammy winner for her. She's the Empress of Soul. It says that, so is the Motown legend a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Put it another way, is Gladys Knight Mormon? Yes, she is. It says she was born into a Christian household, always considered herself religious. And at 2 years old, she recalls feeling a call to God. She told LDS Living, which is a church-owned magazine that Deseret Book manages. She talks more about her childhood and how she believed she was fully committed to God. She was always seeking, searching, trying to follow the Spirit. It says, and it was a spiritual driving force that led Gladys to the church later in her life. It was actually Gladys's children who convinced her to join.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So Gladys's son, Jimmy, and his wife were the first to convert after hearing a friend's testimony. Gladys' daughter, Kenya, joined the LDS church and started to involve Gladys in the church in 1997. And she officially converted and was baptized by Jimmy. And a few years later, her husband, William, joined. And then she started the all-volunteer multicultural Latter-day Saint church choir called the Saints Unified Voices.
Jesus, I can take it. Through him I know I can stand. No matter what may come my way, my life is in your hands. Then you feel a little better, you sing a little stronger. Know that I can make it. I know that I can stand.
And this was at the time where we saw Alex Boyer, another black man in America, front and center in the Tabernacle Choir. We're starting to see this shift the church is taking to where shortly after this, we're seeing President Russell M. Nelson, who became the prophet after Gordon B. Hinckley and Thomas Monson, then President Nelson, developed such a strong relationship with the NAACP, acknowledging some of the bad history and then giving a lot of resources to help the NAACP provide scholarships. Just so all of this seemed to be this beautiful lead in. And Peter, music always is the prelude.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, go back to Gladys. So late 90s, I remember that. And I remember she just kind of clicked with Gordon B. Hinckley. They had this sort of playful friendship. And so you get a couple of moments that I think are significant. She gets invited. I don't know what year this was. What's that? Oh yeah, it was Gordon B. Hinckley's birthday, and so she's invited to sing. It's probably in the conference center, 20,000 seat conference center venue, and she sings a song. And then they had this playful banter that's not scripted like Face to Face, because Gladys, I suspect Gladys won't do that. Like Gladys has got to be authentic.
Well, the conversation, she said to President Hinckley, this is a famous conversation.
Yeah.
The LDS music is boring. The stuff you sing in church is boring.
She said the way she put it was, I love your church, but you got to do something about your music.
Yes. Yes. And he said, well, Gladys, feel free, do whatever you want to do. And that's why.
And so she did the choir. That's where she did the choir.
But it still did not change anything. Like here in the South, it's still Parliament,
Yeah. Yeah, but that is that's a moment that most Mormons who are tuned into like the arts will remember when Gladys playfully ribbed the who people consider the prophet of the church about their music. And he laughed and said, let's do it. And so that's a moment. And you can say that there has been, not fast change, but they have, as we talked about last time on the part 1, they have loosened the rules in sacrament meeting. They have, we're not to the point of having, drums in sacrament meeting or anything like that. But I think we're really, I think there's a heightened awareness that like spirituality manifests culturally in so many different ways. And when you get drumming, you get drum circles going in places. That's a spiritual thing going on. And I think Mormons used to feel like there was, we have the fullness. And so, no, the appropriate music is very reverent and subdued. And I think now, we're just a young church. It's taken us a long time.
Yeah.
We're recognizing that the Spirit can manifest in a lot of ways.
And so much of the founders of Mormonism, they observed what was going on in England. They observed Methodism, what John Wesley had created. Even the communion today, the sacrament trays that are passed around to everybody, that comes from Methodism. They were the first to invent the idea of these little cups, which sometimes somebody said they're little shot glasses, and every week you take a shot with Jesus. So they love communion glasses. But that comes from the Methodist and a lot of the procedure of the way communion is done, which they call sacrament meeting. And my wife, who never was LDS, was like, why do you call it a meeting? Why don't you call it a service? Who wants to go to a meeting?
I know. And it's like, and also I like the word communion better than the sacrament. I think communion is so evocative. Like I'm communing with God. I love that. And I remember there's a blog or something, or somebody went, he was a writer, and he went and he decided he was going to go to like 50 churches in 50 weeks or something and just write a blog about it. And so he goes to an LDS church and he tells a story, and he's like, so I just walked in and, it's a Sunday and the meeting house is bustling with activity, because that's how it feels in LDS churches. It's just a lot of business going on. And he said, the first thing I noticed is like people would come up to say, hey, can we help you? Are you visiting? So the first thing I realized is there's the Mormons have a lot of presidents. That's the Relief Society president, and that's the Elder Quorum president, and that's the branch president, that's the stake president. So
yeah, I mean, if you study the pageantry of 19th century England, you will understand a lot of Latter-day Saint culture, traditions, rituals. And I'm not going to say they're not divinely inspired. I'm going to say that a lot of tradition is borrowed from the pageantry of, if you watch the Queen's Jubilee, or if you watch the coronation of the King, the Queen, or any of these things, you'll see these integrated into Mormon culture, the way Parliament is conducted. The first time my wife went, we're sitting in the meeting and she looks up and she goes, am I in a courtroom? Because it is designed like a courtroom where you have a bench, you have the recorders over there in the corner, and I was like, no, this is, but then of course you go into any Presbyterian, you go into any Methodist church, it looks like that, but she comes out of Catholicism where you have the cathedrals, these beautiful, magnificent churches with fantastic reverb, and then natural reverb. And then you go into, like a Saddleback church, which is, it's still like it, but it's more like an auditorium. I mean, you stand up and you worship, and then you listen to your 40-minute homily service which is more like Mormon Sunday school. So anyways.
And my brother, I'll add one more just for humorous effect. My oldest brother, he was never really in
Yeah.
our church, but he does remember going as a teenager. And I asked him, well, what's your memory of it? And he's like, I remember that there's always like that guy that would poke his head in the meeting and say, hey, can I come? You know, they'd always have like a notebook. Hey, can I talk to you for a second? And that's his memory. Like there's always this little, like, it's like a little business, you know, hey, I need to talk, the bishop needs to talk to you. I need to schedule you for this appointment with the bishop. It's just it's a funny, you know, it's a funny memory. And when you're inside it, you don't see it as funny. It seems normal, but.
Yeah, that was my job back in the day. I was the executive secretary. I was like, the bishop's muscle is, you know, I was the guy that like was responsible for getting the appointments and the meetings and had to call people and be like, you know, he needs to talk to you. And they're always like, oh no, what did I do? You know, they were like, yes, great, awesome. But as a kid, do you remember as a kid, you're right in the middle of service, right after sacrament, you know, which is like a 10-minute period where it's quiet and you reflect and you take communion. And then a guy would stand up with a notepad and walk down each aisle. And
he's counting people. That's probably not unique to any church or just our church. I'm sure just taking roll, but it's like, yeah, he's just silent.
Yeah, because then you would go into your second hour. Because church back then, well, when we were kids, it was like 2 hours.
Morning, afternoon.
Go home and come back, and then you come on Wednesday, and then you played baseball on Thursday, road show on Saturday. These were the great glory days. I loved it. But now it's like 2 hours. So, but when we were younger.
Which are my glory days. Sorry, just go ahead.
Yeah, the second hour, you know, in your Sunday school class, they'd give roll. Like you're in class. I mean, like, is so-and-so here? You're like, yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Are you present? Can you stop? Can you get off the floor and get in your chair? And
I think they've gotten away from that a little bit. I think eventually we'll get away from some of these other things.
Oh, I think I love it. We all have memories of growing up in church. All my friends that are from other churches have these stories. You know, they're all preachers' kids. But also we would sing a lot of hymns. We would sing a lot of these primary songs. We would sing a lot of these things. So, okay, we completely digress. Now let's move away from Gladys Knight.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to plug in though Nathan Pacheco, who's kind of like the darling right now. We did a song together, One by One, that was written, that I wrote with one of the apostles, Hildur Bednar.
Mm-hmm.
I do not know if that's going to make it into the new church hymn book since I'm not participating. We'll see how much he loves it. And then James.
All it would take is one phone call from Elder Bednar. No, I don't think
that, honestly, I don't think that's true at all, because when we were writing the song and we talked about that in the first, go back and listen to that first episode. We talked about the bureaucracy and the layer.
Yeah.
Trying to even get that song to where I had any rights over it. And, you know, I was going to talk briefly about one-hit wonders like James the Mormon.
Mormon rap. The Mormon rap. That was
No, there was Mormon.
No. I know. James the Mormon's more recent, but there was the Mormon rap in the late '80s. That was a one-hit wonder.
Gosh,
I don't even know if those guys were probably not LDS. It was a little satirical, but it got radio play in Salt Lake.
Well, no, the Mormon rap song originally, and I met this guy, trying to remember his name, Walter and Hayes Band.
Yeah, that's them.
Walter and Hayes Band, the Mormon rap, and it was hilarious.
Mormon.
If you didn't understand, it was under comedy as a comedy novelty song in which the rapper describes his lifestyle through a series of Mormon cultural stereotypes.
I'm a fine young man, I'm living clean. Don't smoke, don't drink, if you know what I mean. I don't touch soda pop, if it has caffeine, you might say I'm a good little sunbeam. I didn't even date till I turned 16. I don't even know the meaning of the word obscene. Flippin', fetchin', scruddly me. Well, ye Merry Christmas and fiddle-dee-dee. Mormon back to the Mormon back. Mormon back to the Mormon back.
And that kind kind of inspired like Sons of Provo, that Will Swenson, who is playing Neil Diamond in New York Broadway production of A Beautiful Noise. Great musical, by the way, if you get a chance.
But Will came out of a Mormon family. Now he was Javert on Broadway. He's married to Audra McDonald. I mean, he's
everyone knows him in the Tony world. My friend Michael Finley was Jean Valjean when he was Javert, and Michael Finley was also Elder, who's the kind of the obese short companion in musical.
Mormon musical.
Yeah,
I don't remember his name.
We've had a lot of conversations about Mormonism, and he's like, man, I didn't know you're such a defender for someone who's not participating. You're a big I'm like, it is family. And so, okay, we'll go down this path for like maybe the next 15 minutes and then wrap it up. But there are a lot of Mormons doing mainstream commercial music. We started with Donnie Marie, the Osmonds, Randy Bachman of Bachman Turner Overdrive. I'm just going to read this list. And people out there may know other Latter-day Saints that are in bands, but this is what I've got. So Randy Bachman, Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Formerly Mormon.
Yeah. Well, Tal.
No, both. I think both of them are out now.
Okay, because his son Tal.
I mean, I feel gossipy, and I don't know.
No, you're fine. His son Tal is a one-hit wonder. I met Randy at a award show in Canada because I was part of a
okay.
So I would go.
How long ago was that?
I'd go to their Grammys and stuff like that. This was maybe like 3 years ago.
Okay. He was BTO, Bachman Turner Overdrive. He was the Guess Who. He wrote. I mean, he's a legend.
He is a legend. Arthur Kane, the New York Dolls. If you get a chance, watch the documentary.
He's the bass player for the New York Dolls band. Converted to Mormonism.
Devoted his life to doing genealogical work and helping at the temple in Los Angeles. But do you remember the documentary name?
Yeah, New York Doll. Singular.
Yeah. Watch that.
Made by Greg Whiteley, our harmonica player. I mean, once upon a time, he's in California. He's done a lot of great stuff, but New York Doll was his breakout documentary.
Played the harmonica, so this documentary does not blow. Pretty good. We have the how do you say it? Watanabe's the Jets.
Don't you know, you got it all over him. You got me over him.
Oh, the Jets. Yeah, the Wolfgrams. Wolfgram family.
And if you had a Polynesian friend in high school, they were probably related. They always said they were the cousins.
Well, and Salt Lake has such a vibrant Polynesian community, and the Wolfgrams came out of that. They were at South High School, which is closed, and Rudy, Lisa, they're I just want to say this really fast. They are beloved. They are like people who know them. I'm not talking. I'm just talking.
As human beings.
Everybody I interact with, and I've done a little bit with them. They're so respectful. They're so like loyal to their family. Wolfgrams they're rock stars in more ways.
Yeah, they are some of the best people, and they loved, I think, their experience. They got a Grammy, I think, but they were never. There came a point where they didn't take it too serious. Their family was first, and they lived by their principles.
Yeah. Very much like the Osmonds.
Yes. So a lot of respect for the Jets. They love the Lord. They're great. There's James Valentine, and I don't know if these people are active or not active or left the church or whatever, but James Valentine, he's the Maroon 5 guitarist.
Oh yeah, his dad taught at maybe still teaches at BYU. He's from like American Fork, I think, is what I've heard. Yeah, that's been a long career right there.
Yeah, good for him, You have Diamond Rio's Dan Truman, the keyboard player, and Dan, his sons, the Truman brothers, are now current. Their music is with Deseret Books Shadow Mountain. They have incredible songs. They're gifted. They're amazing. They live here in Nashville.
That Due West?
No. They're just the Truman Brothers.
Truman Brothers. Okay.
Due West was another group that was our good friend Jeremy Barron. We could go through the Jeremy Barron days promoting Latter-day Saints. But because I think he was responsible at Hawaii to bring people in BYU Hawaii. And so, Due West, he was their road manager. That was a popular group. They're not together anymore. But Dan Truman from the Diamond Rio. And then the country singer that everyone knows, Gary Allen, was LDS. And Brandon Flowers from the Killers. And Brandon's been we talked about him quite a bit in the previous episode. So go back and listen to that. We talked about
Brandon, just so you know, Brandon is, so there's a podcast called Faith Matters. And it's, I would describe this podcast as, some people use this analogy, like if you're in an organization and you're at the center of the organization, you're loyal, you don't question it, that's fine. But you also, and then you get people who leave the circle, they leave the church, they leave whatever. And Faith Matters is kind of more like Inside the Edge, and they explore topics that you wouldn't hear in gospel doctrine or Sunday school, but it's mostly a faithful. Anyway, they started a conference a year ago called Restore, and it sold out one of the Salt Palace convention rooms. And I think my wife went, I wasn't there. My wife went and said the feeling in the room was, holy smokes, everybody's giddy here because they're realizing there's so many people in this Inside the Edge space. There are people who don't agree with everything, who are wrestling. Their relationship with the church may be complicated, but they're in. And anyway, they have music at these conferences. And who was it last year? There were several. Anyway, Brandon Flowers is doing it this year. It's in like 3 weeks.
It's like when the Living Scriptures started making cartoons of Book of Mormon stories, and I would watch those as missionaries and be like, wow, this is awesome. Nephi is a cartoon character, and you're really feeling these stories. And Lex D. Azevedo wrote all this music, and
it was Ron Bluth. It was somebody from a Disney. It was one of the old Disney animators from the
that gave us secrets
70s.
Gave us secrets in Nim, and I remember saying to you, do your kids watch these? And you're like, you're like, the last thing I need is for my kid when they think of Nephi to think of a
cartoon character.
And I thought that was so wise. Let them read and have their own imagination.
Yeah, I had the same concern.
Yeah, so I like that flexibility to where you're not all on one side of Parliament.
This is a whole nother freaking podcast, Paul, because this topic so David Brooks wrote an article where for the New York Times, I think about 4 years ago, where he pulled from a Richard Rohr piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this idea of being inside the edge came. Anyway, when David Brooks printed it, apparently a lot of the Mormon community it really resonated. So it became it's part of it's actually become part of the vernacular here in Salt Lake because it's a growing body of people, and so much so that Spencer W. Kimball, who was the president of the church in the 70s, his grandson Christian Kimball, who's a former bishop but doing Mormonism on his own terms, he wrote a book called Living Inside the Edge, and it's basically it's like a manual.
Okay.
And anyway, this is a tangent again, but it's a fascinating thing happening in Mormonism right now. This move by so many people to not leave, but to go into this new space where they can do it.
Yes. Historically, in most large corporate churches, you have the cultural church and the corporate church. Like you said, you have the high priest
And the prophet.
responsible for the rituals, and the prophet who is basically advocating the message of Christ. And those worlds have blended to the point where it's hard for people that have these unique personal relationship with Christ, where they are feeling led to do certain things that goes maybe in contradiction of what the high priest is advising. You know, you can read the prophet is saying you can receive personal revelation for yourself and the Lord will lead you. But if you take that to heart and you're really seeking to follow what the Lord is telling you, the minute it starts to take you on a path that they don't agree with, that's where you get silenced and there's problems. And I get it.
And that's the job of the high priest.
Yeah. And so, you know, I'm a fierce defender that if you're being led by the Spirit, God is leading you, you have to follow that first and let the consequences follow.
That is to me the way I see it. Of course, I'm a creative, I'm an artist, I'm highly autonomous, and like there's a Joseph Smith quote that many Mormons know that it says, you know, like, how have you succeeded at building this community? He says, we teach them two principles and they govern themselves. And then Ralph Nader, you know, who's not a Mormon, but he has this great quote where he said, we start with the premise in our movement. We start with the premise that we are building and raising leaders, not followers, not soldiers. And so, and I think C.S. Lewis said it, like, the purpose of the church is not to create soldiers. It's just to create, he didn't use that word, but it's to create little Christs. It's to create a generation of people who can receive their own revelation and rely on that safely and get good at that.
Yeah, I mean, if that's always been the message from day one. Go and ask the Lord and he will lead you. And it seems like anytime you get that answer and you're following those patterns, you'll start to see why. And I can list 100 reasons why my decision is validated. There are things that happen to me all the time where I'm vindicated that I'm on the path that he wants me on for whatever reason. And it's not like I'm over here going, oh, this is wrong. No, I'm just following so that when I can stand before God, I have a clear conscience and say, I was deceived completely, and that deception felt really good and better than what I felt normally, or you did lead me where I'm supposed to go. And that's a controversial thing for people to even put out there and say.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's so much to say. Well, it's like we got two values at work at the same time. There's the value of what we're saying, of being able to receive your own inspiration, revelation, and become more like God. Yeah. And then there's the value of building the kingdom or the community or the Zion. And it's like where they come together, like where they bump up against each other. When you get somebody getting some rogue revelation that contradicts the group, like what wins out? And I think that's where you identify which value is higher for you. And for many people I know, it's the Zion kingdom. That's the higher value. For me, it's not. It is absolutely, I want to become more Christ-like, and I want to channel my own ability. And so that tension exists probably in every religious movement. But I'm an artist, so of course I'm going to lean this way, but I feel strongly about it.
Well, let me give you one example of 100 in my life that I've seen happen, where if you're a Latter-day Saint, you'd be championing this. You'd be like, oh my gosh, that is so good. That's so amazing, because we have that famous statement from the Book of Mormon. It is better that one man should perish than a whole nation dwindle in unbelief.
Yeah.
So whoever that one man is that is killed,
Laban,
is he righteous or is not? Well, the reality is it's Christ, because Christ was killed for all of us, And so it's better that one man should perish than a whole nation. So that's where that's coming from. That whole idea, that whole concept. He's the Isaac, he's the sacrificial lamb. But so I go to a lot of Christian leadership retreats, and these are guys that are in some of the biggest bands in the industry. And I'm at one, and I will mention this was the band Mercy Me. Everybody knows them. They're fantastic. So we're sitting around, and Mike, who's the lead guitarist, that's been around forever, goes, "Hey, did you guys ever do that thing where you find out who you're related to?" And I'm like, "Oh, really? What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I found out I'm like Abraham Lincoln's 8th cousin twice removed." And I'm like, "Really?" And then everybody's like, "What's the app?" He goes, "It's called Family Tree." Yeah. So I say nothing. And all of a sudden, everybody's downloading this app. Like 20 guys that stand on stages before like 10 to 20,000 people, every other night. Christians of all faiths, all denominations, with one Christian faith. And then they're going, wait a second. It says the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then they all look at me. "Paul, is this a coup? What's going on here?
Is this a Trojan horse?"
Yeah. Are you here? Are you a secret agent? Are you tricking us? And they have to fill it out. They're like, and so Bart, the lead singer, who's hilarious, he goes, "Is this an application to get the missionaries to show up at my house?" And I said, "Bart, do you want them to show up at your house? Because they can get you a free Book of Mormon, they can get you a free Bible, they can get you the latest, I don't know, maybe the latest Gladys Knights, whatever, hits or whatever." And so anyways, we're all laughing about it, and they all filled out their family search. So now, because of the situation of me leaving and then me being present in this moment, all these people are doing their genealogy work. So you know what I mean, Peter? It's like there's a conundrum, an irony in it all. And it's one of those, well, if I didn't leave, it would have happened some other way. They would have been able to rescue their ancestors some other way. So I'm not saying I was let out just to give, a couple guys an experience to bring in 9,000 names so that, you and your friends can go to the temple and do the work for them so that they can be rescued and saved and go to the terrestrial world in the next life. Or celestial if they qualify, whatever the.
But if that makes your parents feel better, Paul.
Whatever the quote is. No, no, out of love to my parents, I think it's, listen, it's heartbreaking anytime your kid does not follow, the tenets of your faith. And I get it. It would be heartbreaking if one of my own came to me and said they just don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a valid thing for a lot of people, but we did talk about the different childhood homes that we were in. Okay, really quick, we'll get back to this. Just Alan Sparhawk and Mimi Parker up below, Elaine Trees from Neon Trees, Tyler Glenn was obviously in.
Elaine Bradley, right?
Yeah, Elaine Bradley. Sorry. Elaine, who was the host of Grace Notes, BYU program that was bringing in a lot of Christian artists, and that Grace Notes is actually nominated as a TV show for a Dove Award this year. It's the first LDS, publicly known LDS entertainment nominated for a gospel music award. And then you have Stuart Maxwell from The Fictionists, Dallin Weeks of Panic at the Disco. You have Cascade. You
have Ryan Gosling from La La Land.
Well, we could get into actors. We could get in, Brooke White, and you have Brett McCracken from The Used. And then, of course, you have the Five Browns and, piano guys, me, David Tolk, Lindsey Sterling, you, bunch of people that are Mormons doing mainstream commercial music. So, I dabble back and forth in both of it. So the thing I want to end with is we've been talking about, the corporate church having a specific plan and program for hymns that are produced for service, for meetings, for the high priest division of the church. And then you have kind of this prophetic side of using of people following the Lord and creating things and getting them sold commercially. So this all kind of sums up into this brand new hymn book that I guess is supposed to come out in 2024. And it has been, I think, since 1970 or 1980 that we've had, a hymn book. And I just want to,
I think it was mid 80s. I think it was mid 80s.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of talk about maybe it's 80, maybe it's 85. I know some of my friend. I have one friend whose mom was on that committee, and the reason I'm bringing it up is that we talk a lot in our church about how the hymns are all inspired. The selection, it takes a long time because it's a prayerful process. That these songs the selection is inspired, and then they did not include in the 1985 hymn book. What's the song that Mac Wilberg got? So
Amazing Grace. They also forgot to put it in.
Yeah.
You do not forget to put Amazing Grace in. So,
but the Mac Wilberg song, it's Come Thou Fount.
Come Thou Fount.
So, so Mac Wilberg, who's at the time, one of the musical directors of BYU, does an astonishing arrangement of that. It goes viral. And everybody's like, why is that not in our hymn book? And I think the committee who did the 1985 are a little bit on the defensive. Like, I don't know why it's not in, but it is going to be definitely in the next one, they say. And also they take submissions. David Tolk submitted in reverence, wrote words to it, submitted. I mean, a lot of these artists have submitted stuff. So it'll be interesting to see.
17,000 submissions. But I figure if you can have, 50 to 60,000 missionaries go out, that every Thursday an apostle can go in and listen to 10 different songs and go thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs down. I don't think that's how it is, but there's a recent article, August 24th, 2023, Edward Krenneke, who's on the committee member. Now, I do have to say that when I looked at the committee, the people that are on the committee doing this for a global church are mainly white, music educated people. Not one of them is an artist. They're all educators in music. There are no creatives. There are no professional musicians like Brandon Flowers or Gladys Knight. They're just not there. Again, we have a corporate committee, and with 17,000 submissions, they have to review all of these, present these obviously to a committee.
And the reason that's troubling, Paul, is that I've got a son, the same son who's in college in Ohio. It's a fine arts liberal arts college. It's a writing school, and he is a writer. And I watched my son, like he'll read a book, and then he'll say, because he's a creator, he's not a professor of literature. You're right. In his mind right now, he's a creator. So he'll read a book and he'll say, why did that affect me? And he'll read it again, and then he'll start to deconstruct and take it apart and try and get inside of it, which is exactly what I did all through high school as I was learning songs for a band I was in, right? And I guess back to your point, like that's what composers, that's what creative people do. They try to figure out, you do that with your music. Why does this song, is it because I'm playing this part light and this part hard? Is it this chord progression? And that I think is needed on a committee when you're trying to decide, if you're trying to go for what is the effect this hymn will have on a room full of people?
Yeah, elevated emotion. Is this going to release the dopamine to get people?
That's what you do.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to people who teach it and professors and academics, they're not always inside the process in that way.
Well, the music industry always says a song is everything. The song is everything. So just to clarify, it says, there's a question asked in this article. This is from BYU's newspaper. How do you make sure that everyone sees himself in this hymn book, regardless of race, nationality, socioeconomic status, gender. We have to represent everything. And he says we have to represent everything because the Lord's children are everywhere. It says that the 1985 version of the hymn book only exists in 43 languages. The translation took 37 years to finish. The latest language to receive that hymn book was in Mongolian in 2022.
Not only that, but all the music feels like it's Anglican. It's all out of England.
Listen, I don't want to be on that committee because 17,000 submissions, the number of people who naively will have their feelings hurt, which is why I understand the idea and the process, but if you have a professional committee, technically you should just go through and select by, if you're doing marketing and analysis, which they do a lot of, but they never talk about, which are the biggest selling Christian songs of all time? Do they coincide with our doctrine? And then take in a handful of songs that have been submitted over the years that already speak to these things that we know, because Mac Wilberg is not only he's not only considered one of the greatest composers of our time for choirs, but he happens to be the conductor of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, the Tabernacle Choir. And he's got incredible works, but they're sophisticated, so they may not always fit. And when we did One by One, me and Elder Bednar, the main thing was I thought I was overcomplicating it. I was like, man, I should get revelation like Bach if this church is true. And then it occurred to me, Jesus tells simple stories. And then it came down to, well, maybe I'm overthinking. And in the middle of the night, I came up with like a little nursery rhyme, like a little row, row, row your boat. Because I remember, and then I presented it to Bednar. It was just a simple melody. And he goes, that's it. That sounds great. And he goes, because the 4-year-old kid in Africa and the 97-year-old in Tooele can sing that song and understand what it is. It's a simple melody. There's nothing breathtaking about it. It's in the arrangement and the recording that we did for my album with Nathan Pacheco and the choir and Marshall McDonald's work and Kayson's American Heritage Lyceum Philharmonic, which is a long title, orchestra. Our job as the musicians and the artists on the outside is to take this music and to create it into something that is going to release the dopamine and help people feel the Spirit of God. So the hymn book, again, conforms to, like the handbook, a universal parliamentary approach, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's Presbyterianism 101, it's Methodism 101, it's Catholicism 101. No matter what Catholic church you go to throughout the world, you're going to sing the same hymns in ordinary time. It's always the same. And I think that there's power in having everything be the same no matter where you go in the world. But it's the people who can have the creative, as President Uchtdorf, one of the apostles, who's now not in the first presidency, but he always said, create something that's never been before, create. And it's our job to then take all these things that are presented to us in a corporate bureaucracy form and make them creative, like the woman, like the woman that is a housewife that has a job on the side, raises kids, but she's got to teach little kids on Sunday. She's given the principles of what to teach, but she has to come up with a creative way to teach that's going to have impact. And I think that's the essence of what I'm trying to get through overall in this part 2.
Yeah.
That it's laid out before us, but it's up to us to make it special.
Well, it's interesting we're ending with the hymns, because the hymns, maybe those are the raw materials that, I don't know, like I because I was in an inactive, non-practicing family growing up, I wasn't exposed to a lot of the hymns, but then I was, as a missionary, And I personally never had a massive connection to many of the hymns, although I have my favorites. I would suspect you do, though, because it is part of your your memory from as far back as you can remember, and you've done several, how many albums now that are sort of
many.
And this book that they put out next year, this hymn book, could become, like I said, the raw materials for the next generation of, like I say, I didn't have a connection, but then again, I had that experience in the MTC where I was really kind of hurting because I was homesick, and we stood in a circle, and it was Sweet Hour Prayer that was sung that night, and I never heard it, and it just really like soothed me. And how I eventually did do a version of that song, I like, we can say that it doesn't influence us, but like I have a song called Jens. So I did an arrangement of Sweet Hour Prayer for a trek. I ended up performing it on Grace Notes, but out of that, like the arrangement ended up being, I was pretty satisfied with it, and I liked it. So I went and I would never record Sweet Hour Prayer, so I adapted it into a song called Jens Peter Larsen, which is on my last album, and that's Sweet Hour Prayer, but taken a step further and turned it into my own song. So
yeah,
they do influence culturally, even guys like me.
The minute you hear those melodies, it transports you back to that time. So
yeah. Where do we go from here? Who knows? Predictions for the future from the Mormon music world? I have no predictions. I have no idea. Paul Cardall is going to continue to churn out the hits.
I think it's exciting. I love seeing all these artists emerge.
Yeah, and I'm down in the place called Spring City right now, which is rural Utah. Just here for the day because I teach songwriting at a college here called Snow College. I was blown away immediately by the amount of talent. Provo, Utah has a music scene that people talk about. It's a lot of stuff's coming out of there. Ephraim is like a little small. It's like a little satellite to Provo, and it's been remarkable. And in fact, my second day class this semester. Let me pull her name up real fast. You find this interesting. They said her name is Gemma Griffiths. She is a huge star in Zimbabwe. She's from Zimbabwe. She's a white girl from Zimbabwe who got a scholarship to play trumpet at Snow College, came to Snow College, and between her junior and senior year at Snow College, she got a spot at a Zimbabwe music festival in London, and as a result of that, got on with a manager, the same woman who signed Ed Sheeran to his first deal, and now Gemma Griffiths is a star in Zimbabwe. And she was our guest lecturer. I'm like, there's no Mormon connection, but she came out of our Utah scene, which is a Mormon scene, and she has nothing but glowing things to say about her time here. And she came out of the Snow College. Go look her up. I think you just did.
I love that area. My sister went to Snow College. I did a bunch of EFYs as a counselor on Snow College, and they've got that great canyon up there where you can go fish and camp. And yeah, I love it down there. So, well, Peter, it's been another 2.5 hour show.
Sorry, everybody.
So we've just dialed in. We're still falling short of the length of a John Dehlin one day.
Yeah. You're only about halfway there, Paul.
My ridiculous interview with him was 5 hours. 5 hours. You can tell my voice at the very end. They're like, "What's wrong with him? He's dying."
His voice is getting weaker.
The more he talks about the church, the he's gonna fading. He's fading quick. Do his work. Get his temple work done. So, all right, brother.
All right.
Keep in contact.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you later.
I'm I'm a fine young man, I'm living clean. Don't smoke, don't drink, if you know what I mean. I don't touch soda pop, if it has caffeine, you might say I'm a good little sunbeam. I didn't even date till I turned 16. I don't even know the meaning of the word obscene. Flip and fetch and scruddly me. Well, ye many Christmas and fiddle-dee-dee. More and better, more and back, do the more and back. More and better, more and back, do the more and back.
Did you know the best way to support your favorite musician is to bypass social media and go to their website and subscribe to their mailing list? Going directly to the artist's website ensures you and the artist will have no third party controlling your relationship. It's a direct contact. Please show your support, particularly for our host. Go to Paul's website and subscribe, followed by other artists you enjoy. Visit www.paulcardall.com. Not only is Paul a podcast host, but has gifted the world with award-winning music that's brought comfort to millions of listeners in more than 160 nations. His latest album, Return Home, is an introspective listening experience. Each song, carefully crafted, takes listeners on a cinematic journey to the lands of his ancestors. In all, Return Home features 13 songs. From his original piano pieces, Shropshire Hills, Immigrant Ships, The Shores of Normandy, Red Poppy Fields, Fathers and Daughters, Eliza's Theme, to arrangements of popular hymns, I Believe in Christ, and Love One Another. Whether you just need to relax, study, meditate, pray, or for some other healthy reason, Paul's music helps create an atmosphere of peace wherever you are. Add Paul Cardall's album Return Home to your favorite platform, whether it's iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, or some other. For the sheet music and more information, visit www.paulcardall.com.